I'm here in FreeCAD with a knockoff of a torpedo style prop bait. We're going to design this together today, and believe it or not, the sketches for this are pretty simple. We do have a lot of little numbers and dimensions to deal with when it comes to the propeller, but it's surprisingly easy to create the propeller as well. Let's get started in a new file. The first thing I'm going to do is create my var set for things that I'm going to reuse over and over again. And I need several things here. So what I'm going to do is speed this up and I'll take a screenshot. I'll do a pause at the end so that you can add all of yours. Okay, so here are all the values that you'll need to enter. Okay, let's create the side view of our lure. That'll be on the YZ plane or the side plane. We're going to start with an arc by center, and we're going to drop the center on the horizontal axis. Come here and get the crosshairs for the origin, and then drop the top up here. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to put that point of that arc and the center point in line. I'm going to use the V key on my keyboard. But you could also use this constrained vertical up here on the constraint toolbar. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to set the size here. And that is going to be 8 millimeters. And I'm going to give this a name because we will use it in another sketch later. This will be half the lure height. Let's go ahead and switch over to the line tool and drag out a little line that's straight and a vertical line that's also straight. Now, this vertical line, I want to be 2.5 millimeters high, and I'm going to name this half butt height or tail height, whatever you prefer. And I will dimension it from the origin 50 millimeters. That'll be the length of our lure, besides the prop that comes off the back. Let's go back to the arc tool, but this time let's choose create arc by 3 points. And we want to zoom in here and get the crosshairs and get that point and that point. And then we will take the arc and the line and we'll create a tangent constraint. Then we'll dimension that point from the end of the tail here. And I want this to be 17 millimeters. And when we set that distance, we become fully constrained. But I do need one more line across this horizontal axis to close this shape so that I can set it up for a revolve. So let's close out of here. I'm going to go ahead and name that side profile, because I'll be referring to it later with some expressions. So now the side profile is highlighted. Let's come up here on the toolbar to the revolve, and we're going to select a reference and choose that line and say OK. And that's essentially our lure body. That's really all there is to that part. Let's create another sketch on, oops, I'm going to deselect everything by just clicking in the space here. We're going to create a sketch on the YZ plane once again. I'm going to go ahead and go over to the Model tab and click the Revolve and hit the space bar and bring the profile back so that I can grab some external geometry. We want to use that tool to get the front and the back of the lure. And now it's time to drop some lines. So we're going to drop a line here. We're going to drop another line here, a vertical line, and a line here. Now this first line, we're going to go ahead and set a dimension, I'll use the D key, of 10 millimeters. That matches the screws that I use. And we're going to make the second line equal to it so that it's also 10 millimeters. But I don't want to put it up here. I want it to be on the bottom of the bait. And so what I'll do is use the D to select this axis. And here I'll use the expression, and I will say side profile dot constraints half lure height. And that's going to put that right where it needs to be. And I do need to constrain it from the front, 15 millimeters. This last line needs to be constrained for length as well. And this is where the var set comes in. We're going to use this prop pilot hole length value. And I think 15 is probably more than enough to hold some epoxy. But you could always make this longer if you felt like you wanted more meat here for the twisted wire to glue into the body. Just make sure that there's enough room between the end of this and the wall for the hole that's going to be around this spot here. Let's go ahead and add one more line, and this is going to help us place some of the parts of our propeller. We're going to use the var set to dimension this again. That is going to be var set dot prop shaft length, which just also happens to be 10 millimeters. And we're going to set that to be 2 millimeters apart. And that just sort of represents the fact that you'll want to leave a little space between these things when you go to glue the twisted wire on that holds the prop. So that's it for this rigging sketch. It is fully constrained. Let's close out of it, give it a name. And let's go down here in the properties to the view tab, and let's set the point size to be something like 10. And now we can hide the side profile. Time to drop some cylinders to essentially drill out of our model where we need these holes. So let's drop the first cylinder, and this will be the front for the place where we tie the lure onto our line. And we'll use the expression editor here, and we'll say varset.pilot hole diameter. And again, this matches the screws that I like to use. It's a diameter, so we'll divide it by 2 and say OK. And then because I want to do a 10 millimeter, I'm going to go ahead and make it longer than my cutout, and you'll see that when we map that. So let's take a copy of that, Control C, deselect the var set, Control V, because I want another cylinder that's that same length here. And then let's go ahead and Control V again, but we're going to change this last one. Let's give these some names so we don't get confused. Okay, this last one is going to be a different diameter because that twisted wire that goes in here is quite a bit thicker than the screws. So here we want to use the varset.prop pilot hole diameter divided by 2. And we'll hide all these cylinders so that we can more easily grab points to map them. Here on the front pilot hole, we will come down here to the Data tab, choose Map Mode. And I want to map from the inside of the lure pointing to the outside along the OZX alignment. I'll do the same thing with the mid, OZX, and then the rear, OZX. Let's go ahead and select all of those, hit the space bar and unhide them. And every single one of them is going the wrong direction. And if you notice in that map mode dialog, there are a lot of different choices. One of these is probably the right choice, but I find it easiest to only really use 2 or 3 of these main map modes because most of them you can just reverse. So let's go to the front pilot hole, down here where it says map reverse, and say true. Same thing with the mid, map reversed, and then this one, true. And the length of that is not right. I just noticed that we did not set the height or the length of varset dot pilot hole length. There we go. Now it's going to go all the way to the end of the lure. Now that we have our pilot holes, I will just go ahead and fuse them together, rename them. And I will cut them out of the Revolve by selecting the Revolve first, Control selecting pilot holes, coming up here on the toolbar to the cut. And now we'll have our holes. Let's start the really fun stuff, which is building the prop. We basically have a lure here, but it's not fun, or it's not super cool, at least until we get that propeller. Let's bring the rigging sketch back because we're going to need to align our prop to this. So here I'm going to use a tube. Up here in the part workbench on the primitives, we've got a tube. So I'm going to go ahead and just create that. And I'm going to name this one prop shaft tube. I will go ahead and map it right away. And I want to map it to this point and that line and use that OZX alignment I've been using. And then we'll set its properties. So it just happens to be the right length right now, but because I want this to be controlled by the var set, I want to change the height here. And the only reason it happens to be the right length is because I played with a longer tube here and found that if it got too long, it got too heavy and sort of weighed down the front of the lure. And in FreeCAD, a lot of times when you drop a primitive object, the default is always 10 millimeters. So then I will set its radiuses, and we're going to need a couple of variables here, a couple more expressions. So we're going to use varset.prop shaft hole diameter, okay? Not the pilot hole, which is what goes in the lure. This is a little different size. It's a little larger so that the prop can spin around it. We'll divide it by 2 since it's a diameter. And then on the outer radius, and you'll see that makes that look pretty small because the outer radius is currently large. So for the outer radius of this one, I just want it to be a 0.5 millimeter larger than the inner radius. So I'll use the expression editor, but instead of making a really long expression, I will just refer to the inner radius and then I'll add 0.5. And it gives me this quantity operator. You just have to type in mm. Now, 0.5 millimeter is awfully thin, but I want this to be thin and light so that it can spin very easily. And I found that this does work. We're going to go ahead and add one more tube. And this one, let's hide the prop shaft tube so we can map it. We're going to map this one exactly the same way as we did the other one. We'll go to the map mode. We'll choose the point and the line and the OZX. And this I will call the prop base tube. And here's where we're going to get just a little thicker. So first of all, I'm going to set its height to be 5 millimeters. I'll bring back that tube so you can see what's going on here. And then for its inner radius, I want its inner radius to match the outer radius of this one. So we'll just use that expression. We'll say prop shaft tube dot outer radius. And if I hide the bait and you look at it from this direction, you can see that we're just perfectly fitting this tube. And then the other thing I'm going to do is I am going to set its outer radius. And for its outer radius, I want to actually match it to the back of the lure. And that's why I named a constraint in our side profile sketch. So we will say side profile.constraints half butt height. And because it is a half the height, we don't need to divide it by 2. It's already the right size. So if you bring our bait back now, which is just right now called cut, you can see that those two are the same diameter or the same radius. And I'd like that to sort of match up like that. The other thing that you'll notice is that we've now thickened. This is where our prop blades are going to attach. Let me show you the finished model here again. The prop blades are going to attach here. And so we're now a little thicker. And if you look at this, you can see The difference between the outer radius and the inner radius is how thick that is, which is like 0.52 millimeters, but then we know we have another half there. So we're a millimeter thick here. Okay, let's go ahead and hide these tubes. And we're going to hide the bait too temporarily so we can get our bearings. And let's create the propeller blade. And this is actually a lot easier than it looks. So we're going to deselect everything, and we're going to create a sketch on the XZ plane. So from the front of the bait. And here I'm going to come up to construction geometry. And I'm going to make like sort of a half box here. Making sure that I've got straight lines, horizontal and vertical. I'm going to dimension the length of this to be 12 millimeters. And I'm going to dimension the height to be 2.75. And it looks like I wasn't attached to this axis. So let's just go ahead and select that point and select the axis, and I'll hit the C key on my keyboard to put that point on that line. So now that we've got that, I need to switch out of construction geometry, and I'm going to create an arc here by 3 points. And I'm just going to come in and get the origin and the end of this box and drag up. And I'm going to do that again and drag down. Okay, now we'll take this top arc and the construction line, and we will create a tangency constraint. And then we will take the top arc and the bottom arc and make them equal. And we're fully constrained. And this is the shape of our propeller blade. Now it comes to a point, and we'll fix that here after we've done all of our extrudes. I'm going to go ahead and bring the bait back so that you can sort of reorient yourself with what's going on in the model here. And I'm going to rename this sketch to prop blade. I will now map this sketch down here in the data tab, the map mode. And I will use the same point and line that we put our tubes on, but this time I will align on the ONX. Now, before I close this window, we've got to tilt this prop blade. So if I view this from the top, I want the prop blade to be tilted slightly back. And the way I will do that is I will use degrees here around the axes. And it's not always clear which axis you need to use. So I like to come in here and just do something like type 45 and see what happens, because it'll update in the view. Okay, I can see what's happened is that prop has leaned back that way, and that is something I want. Now, I've already tested this model, of course, and I know that I want this to be 20 degrees. 45 is a little too steep. Okay, so if we view this from the top, you can see it's kind of leaned back a little bit. Now, the other thing I want to do is I want to lean it back this direction. That is on the y-axis. Let's say 20 degrees. But that brought it forward. So you can always go negative here, and let's use a negative 20 and send it back. And the very last thing I'm going to do is we're going to extrude this blade and merge it with the other parts of the prop assembly. And I want to maintain some of the skinniness at the beginning of this prop. And so in order to do that, I'm actually going to push this thing out in the X direction a little bit. So let's say 1 millimeter. And then I want to push it back just a little bit as well. It's a little bit confusing sometimes. You can just mess with this box and see if it does what you wanted. So it did what I wanted, right? My prop is leaning away from the bait, or away from the direction the line will be pulling. That way. It's angled slightly back that direction, and that's exactly what I want. So I will say okay. That's one prop blade, and we need another one. And we just went through all of those steps. The easiest thing to do here is to just go ahead and do a Control-C, deselect everything except for the prop blade, okay? And then Control-V. And we're going to get an exact copy of that prop blade. but it's exactly in the same place. And so what we're going to do now is you can always change your mapping offsets. I'm going to come back to the map mode and click on the 3 dots. And I am going to rotate this thing 180 degrees around the Z-axis. And that's going to flip it like that. And the nice thing about this is because of the way we mirrored it, it's actually facing forward while the other one is facing back. And that's what we'd like. So let's extrude these prop blades. We will do them symmetrically so that they go both directions from where the sketch is. And we'll use 1.5 millimeters. Say OK. Do the same thing with the second blade. And then let's go ahead and bring back our tubes and hide the bait so I can show you one more thing. We're essentially done. But I said that I wanted some decent meat in here. I want this prop to be strong and I want it to connect, right? Oh, it looks like one of these is too close one direction. Hold on, let's fix that. You see how this one on the left is coming in just a little bit and the one on the right's coming in a lot more? I need to flip a sign on that one. And I want to say that was this. Yep, it's that one. So let's go back into the map mode. And instead of going 1 on the X direction, let's go -1. And that will push it back out. Should push it back out. Let's do a recompute object. There we go. Okay, this is what I was trying to tell you. So I want some of this skinniness of the prop here, but I also want a really good attachment when we print. And this is leaving some nubs through here. So we need one more cylinder. And we'll use one more cylinder just to cut those little tips off. Let's first fuse these 2 blades together. And we'll just name it prop blades. And then we're going to drop one final cylinder. And we will hide the prop blades. Actually, let's hide all of this. And we will map that cylinder in the same place that we've been mapping. We'll select that point and that line. We'll say OZX. And for the radius on this, we want to use our var set again. Prop, shaft, hole diameter. And we need to divide it by 2 since it's a diameter. Set its length. Prop shaft length. Say OK. Now we can take the blades and control select the cylinder and perform a cut. And let's bring back the tube and let's fusion all of that together and call it prop. We can hide our rigging sketch and admire our creation here. We have created a prop bait. Now, to attach these, you're going to want to use a 0.041 stainless steel lock wire that you'll twist. And that's why if you use that size wire, the var sets that I gave you will fit very well. The shaft hole diameter is the hole going through here, and that's larger because we want to freely spin around the wire. But the pilot hole inside the bait, which is this hole here, is a little smaller diameter. It's just large enough to accept that wire and some epoxy without the epoxy just sort of dripping out or not having anything to grab. I hope you enjoyed the tutorial. Get on out there and catch you a really cool fish. Thanks for watching.